My name is Charles Turner. I'm the timpanist of the London Symphony Orchestra. Thursday the 28th of March. Arrived safe at Liverpool, a little late. Saw Mother, but only had time to speak and was ushered on board anyhow. Mother saw us slowly steam away. I waved my hat a long time. Got fixed up in cabin, which was our home for the week. The sea like a lake, and cannot feel any motion. Saturday the 6th of April. Awake about 3 or 4 a.m, still dark. The engines are stopping, and it disturbs me. We are getting into New York Harbor.
Coming in here, having been away from land for such a long time, and arriving here, it's such a different place. It must have seemed like they were such a long way away from home.
We are a very long time landing, and when we land, lots of trouble with the baggage. They inspect it all. Go to Hotel Victoria, Broadway. They have put 3 or 4 beds in one room.
Some things haven't changed. It still takes ages to get through immigration. When our instruments, which come through separately nowadays on a separate flight, everything has to be opened and checked. But I'm happy to say we get a room each these days and don't have to share with 4 of our colleagues. I'm standing on Brooklyn Bridge. This is where, on the first day after they arrived in New York, Charles Turner came with his friend Fred Merry. He was one of the percussionists, and they stood here, just over there, having their photograph taken. You can't really see the backdrop in the photograph, it's a bit blurry, but I imagine it was very different to the one you can see behind me now. New York's changed quite a lot, but still just as impressive.
Mary and I have a walk to Brooklyn Bridge, a gigantic affair over the mouth of the Hudson River. Nothing happens. Rehearsal in the evening with Mr. Nikic. Brahms' symphony very strict and particular. Of course, it is very necessary.
Maybe Arthur Nikic was not a very large man, but his eyes are playing a much more important role than his hands. Although he makes it, of course, easy for the orchestra when baton is half of his own size.
Mr. Nikic rehearses very finely, and we expect a great performance.
The London Symphony coming to Carnegie Hall was a big deal. And there was publicity all over town. They came and they did their first 2 concerts at Carnegie Hall, and then they went on this breakneck tour of America. How they could possibly take the train, unpack, get to the hotel, and then perform, and perform well. Actually, when you think about it, the touring hasn't changed that much.
No, well, what's funny is actually you say get off at the hotel. They didn't.
They didn't.
They
go right to the concert hall.
They went straight to the hall. They just ate, slept, and travelled on that train for about 4 weeks. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, and a lot of it was at night. They complained they didn't really see very much of
They
the
didn't
country.
see America.
No. So it must have been hellish, I think.
Tuesday the 9th of April. 10 o'clock train for Boston. My first experience in an American train. Quite all right. We have a 6-hour journey. They have a famous orchestra in Boston. Hope we do well. Boston looks a homely English-like town, much better than New York. When we get in the restaurant at 6:30, a band is playing In the Shadows. Went and had the best dinner I have had. Here it is. Oysters, soup, salmon, roast lamb and green peas, orange punch, a beautiful kind of ice cream. Then, a roast pigeon with potatoes, salad, asparagus, olives, then another fine ice, vanilla flavoured, and coffee. I went through the lot.
The critics, perhaps protective of their own orchestra, basically decided that Nikic was great and the LSO was bad. And to make matters worse, the orchestra left Boston on a specially chartered Pullman train. They had to eat, sleep and travel on the train for the rest of the 24 days of the tour. On top of that, they would usually play 2 concerts every day.
I've got 2 really quite simple drums in front of me here, and they're tuned very simply. If you imagine a kettle with a natural skin placed on top and several hand screws to tighten the tension and release the tension. I'm now tightening the screws, which will produce a higher pitch. So tuning is quite a laborious process. So from these simple drums, I'm rather envious of this chap standing next to me who has some very wonderful new instruments.
What we have here is a state-of-the-art, 21st century pair of pedal timpani. There are 3 methods to tune the drum, and I would normally sit down, well, not normally, I always sit down to play the drums because they have pedals to change the notes on the drums, as you can hear. And there's also a hand fine tuner, so if you're a bit flat, you can tune the drum up and down with your hand or your pedal, as I've demonstrated. And also there's a little nifty gadget here, a foot fine tuner, so if you're doing a roll, no free hands, you can tune with your foot.
Tuesday the 16th of April. We hear about the White Star Line Titanic going down. It causes great concern.
What happened in 1912 we know. Titanic left without LSO musicians on board.
The tragic maiden voyage of Titanic was postponed by 3 weeks. The concert dates were already fixed, and so the LSO never did go on Titanic. I'm here downtown Manhattan at WQXR radio station, which is the classical music station of New York City. They've asked me to come in and talk about my top 10 LSO recordings, which I'm going to do now. It's going out live on the radio later on. The first recording is of the Egmont Overture by Beethoven. It's a great piece, obviously one of the classics of the repertoire, but the reason I've chosen this recording is it's the very first recording ever made by the LSO. It was recorded back in 1913 with Arthur Nikic conducting. Now, interestingly, it was the first piece that the LSO played on their tour in 1912 at Carnegie Hall. When they got back, the recording industry was still in its infancy, so the sound quality isn't what you'd expect these days, but this has been digitally remastered. But what's fascinating about it is it's the sound of the LSO from 1912. This is exactly, it's the same orchestra, same players that the audiences in New York will have heard exactly 100 years ago.
Sunday the 28th of April. Concert at night in the Metropolitan Opera House. Beautiful house and filled up with a terrific audience. The band is terrific and Nikic in fine form. We sleep in the hotel tonight after living on the train for nearly 3 weeks.
The reviews were fantastic, describing the concert as a capital performance. One critic suggesting that there were so many points of significance that there simply wasn't the room to say it in the review. Nikic was afforded the kind of reception that one would expect for the pop stars of the future. The New York Times reported with an alliterative gem of a headline, Women wildly wave handkerchiefs at last concert of London Symphony Orchestra. Storms of applause greeted Nikic after every number which he conducted, and at the end of the concert, women rushed down the aisles to the front, waving their handkerchiefs wildly and cheering. Has that happened to you yet?
Well, I'm in a different shape today. We are doing concerts in the modern halls. There is only one way, only one scenario to make people run. If someone screams alarm or, God forbid, fire alarm, so then maybe it can happen.
The papers are commencing to rave about us, and we get terrific notices. The Sun last night spoke rudely about the timpani and apologises today, saying the acoustic properties of the hall must have been responsible. Tuesday the 30th of April. We board the Potsdam of the Holland-American line. It sails at 10 a.m. prompt. We bid goodbye to the American shores with very little regret, looking forward to getting home.
Howard Pugh was delighted with the success of the tour and immediately invited them back in 1914. Of course, that was not to be, as the storm clouds were already gathering across Europe before the outbreak of war. In fact, the LSO didn't return to America again until 1964.
Friday the 10th of May. We arrived safely at Plymouth at about 8 o'clock. We're soon off the boat on a tender and into Plymouth. England looks like a beautiful garden after what we have seen. Glad to get home, after travelling perhaps over 12,000 miles in 6 weeks and 1 day.